we'll hope Ms. Reichert can join us. Dr. Jelmstead, I think we're ready to proceed.
Okay, you have the agenda for today's meeting from February 26th. The matters remaining on the agenda are numbers 10 through 19, I believe. But we now need a motion to take from the table those agenda items that were put on the table. Chris, you want to make that motion since you were the one?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. This is Chris McEwen. I formally move to take items 10 through 19 from the table so we can proceed with our agenda items from the meeting on Thursday.
Is there a second?
Melliker, second.
Okay. Second from Malaker. Christie, call the roll.
Mr. Shaft?
Shaft is here.
Ms. Nesset? Yes. Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
I had to step out for just a second. Yeah. What's the yes?
Ms. Reichert? Yes. Dr. Melliker?
Yes.
Board Chair Jelmstead?
Yes. Okay, continuing on with the agenda. First of all, I'd like to thank those that gave reports last week. The presidents, you did an excellent job, and I've heard a lot of good comments. Also, Zachary and Fernando and Emma for your reports from your different associations. Let's just continue on with the first item of business, the legislative action on the tuition model. Any comment, Larry?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair Jelmstead. So we're on item number 10 of the agenda, which is action on legislation as necessary. You received that packet from us, and looking specifically at page number 7, what we're just asking the board is these are the positions, our recommended positions as we move forward with engrossed House Bill 1003. And Dr. Jelmstead, just turn it over to you for discussion and decision on what to do relative to page number 7, the engrossed House Bill 1003 position discussion.
Is there any action we should take?
I'm sorry, this is Kevin Melliker. I'd make a motion to get the discussion started. And the motion would read, as members of the State Board of Higher Education, on behalf of our students, staff, citizens of North Dakota, and the integrity of our system, we need to make a stand on House Bill 1003. I move for adoption of the position paper in front of you.
Is there a second?
I'll second for now. This is Chris McEwen.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for House Bill 1003. Any discussion?
Mr. President, this is Grant.
Okay.
I would like to see us remove item 4A from the position paper. I'm speaking to what is page 7. 4A includes the language legal and internal audit services. I think at our last meeting, I spoke quite a bit as to, my concern that the board needs to have a full discussion on these two areas with regard to, the merits of shifting or transferring those types of services, primarily the legal services, under the umbrella of the Attorney General's office. It's difficult in what we have set up with regard to this meeting in a legislative update to try to get our arms around it. But I'll suffice to say that I don't share a lot of the concerns that have been outlined in some of the memorandums as to the general concept of bringing the legal services under the Attorney General's office. I did discuss that at length during the last meeting, but I think it's important for board members to realize that this isn't really a new concept in higher education. I mean, you'll find that a considerable number of university systems and standalone universities, their legal counsel comes under the umbrella of their state Attorney General's office. You'll find it in the state of Washington, the Ohio State system, Colorado, Virginia, Utah, Mississippi, among others. So it's not a new concept, and it works quite well in those systems. However, I think what's in front of us today is just really how to deal with this with the legislature, because obviously right now this isn't a board policy we're discussing, because we're not driving this bus right now. And this is a piece of legislation that would mandate the transfer of the legal and audit services. So I think the real question for the board is the appropriate response. My view is that the appropriate response at this time is to not take an opposition position, but to stay neutral on the legislation and offer amendments to the legislation. And I say it not necessarily from a board position, but looking at this legislatively. If you take a look at the roots of both of these proposals, I think most folks who have some savvy with the legislature will agree that there is a very significant likelihood that both the legal and the audit services transfer is going to get passed. And if that is the case, then I think some of the very practical problems that have been outlined in some of the memos that we've seen regarding what to do with higher paid employees, things of that nature, can be addressed through the amendment process. My concern is if we simply take an opposition position, that to some degree we send the message out that we don't want a seat at the table when it comes to the amendment process. And I think, given, as I indicated, what I see as a real likelihood of these matters passing, I think we need a full seat at the table to offer necessary amendments. I think those legislators that are supporting this are open to those amendments, and by coming out with a full-fledged opposition, I don't think we send the right message to them. So my view would be that we remove 4A from this position paper, that we stay neutral on 4A but offer amendments to make what's before the Senate the best bill possible. And ultimately, if we need to take a position when we see the bill in its final form, when we get closer to conference committee, we can then decide if we want to take a position or not. So my view is we need to remove that. I can't support the position paper if it includes 4A, but with 4A out, I'm in support of it.
So this is Eric, and I know Grant and I are going to see on opposite sides of this, perhaps, but he highlighted a study that was done some years ago, and actually the outcome of that study was the status quo was found to be the most desirable approach, and I know I had spoken about lack of institutional memory on that, other than Mr. Schaft, and having the state board meeting minutes from November 17, 2011 in front of me. It's really clear in the update on legal committee services committee that Mr. Schaft said the committee found no need to change the system under which legal services are delivered to the NDUS. And that's a significant difference from what was discussed in the previous meeting, of which this meeting is continuing. And I think the concern is, I have from the faculty side is, I don't disagree with Grant in that, perhaps an amendment phase, but I think part of it is this is a very prescriptive nature of how we're going to do this. And it suggests that, as written, that all the attorneys are going to essentially be without a job on June 30th. If they want to reapply for a position as a higher education attorney within the Attorney General's office, they can do so. That really puts the system at a huge potential disadvantage. If these attorneys who will be currently looking for jobs and maybe take a job elsewhere, if we lose not only the institutional memory of those attorneys, but the collective experience of those attorneys within higher education. And so I recommend to the board that you, at a minimum, I think we need to look at if there's a transfer, and Mr. Schaaf is absolutely correct. There's two models out there. One is the attorneys report to the AG, but they're embedded mostly at the institutions. This is unspecified as to the mechanisms by which the legal counsels, these six individuals would then report or help the institutions and then report to the AG. It's a very murky, and it really reminds me of some of the other murkiness that we've seen in the past year. And frankly, the devil's in the details on this. And I, for one, strongly support that we have some type of commentary on this point. I think it's really important that unintended consequences could be very drastic if this would move forward.
Mr. President, this is Grant, and I just want to offer just a brief comment in response to Eric. I want to, in case it's unclear what my position was at the last meeting, my concern was that we had a motion to approve this position, which included opposition to transferring legal and audit before the board had ever had any discussion on the issue. And my point isn't necessarily favoring one model over another. It's simply to say that there is some merit to having the legal services under the umbrella of an Attorney General's office, and I think the board, prior to just being shepherded into a position, needs to know that there is merit to that. And although the previous Legal Services Committee investigation resulted in us saying at that point in time we didn't think a change was necessary, I wanted to underscore the fact that we did as a committee find that there was some merit to that as a result of our discussion with the Attorney General's office. A lot of that merit came to what was one of our concerns, and that is the evaluation process with regard to the system attorneys. We found that we did not have a solid evaluation process, and that's an area we needed to address. And I think the minutes from that November 17, 2011 meeting clearly indicate that. And one of my continued concerns is that we still haven't gotten our arms around that. One area that we did find that we had some favorable discussion with the Attorney General was the ability to bring the system attorneys into the evaluation process that the Attorney General's office uses. But the point in the discussion is that this is a very complex thing. There are different models out there. You find that the Ohio State system has had considerable success using this type of a model. As far as board members, I don't think the appropriate time for us to determine which model we want is necessarily trying to take a position on legislation. So again, to be clear, my point is just that there is some merit to this model, but I don't take a position as to where we should be as a board because I don't think we've looked at it enough, and I think that's crystal clear. However, the question before us today is what position do we take legislatively? And that being the case, I don't think anybody would disagree that the bills in their current form, aside from being killed, need significant amendments. So what is the best posture for this board to take to be in a place to offer those types of amendments? My view is that we should not come in opposed, but take a position that the bills need further monitoring by the board and they need amending.
Well, Grant, do you think this is an important issue? So I'm just going to move on into one of the points is, and this is the issue of the devil in the details. If we're talking about, and Grant's absolutely correct, it does say that one of the issues in those minutes is evaluation, and there were some recommendations made, but apparently that's has not really been implemented, and probably people have just forgotten about that element. But I think it brings several important issues up. I mean, one is clearly we have to have a process for evaluation, but more importantly, should we be making a recommendation here that if we want to, my problem is the legislature is essentially telling us that we're going to use an AG model. We haven't studied that. It is out there. It is successful. Institutions do that. But those attorneys are also on those campuses. I mean, there's a lot of more information that we need to really say that to embrace that model or not to embrace the model. So I agree with all that. But the point is, what should the stance be that we should take here? And I'd like to hear from others with regards to what people think, because this is really important from a faculty perspective and really a student and staff perspective as well. And so, that's I'll defer to others at this point, but that's my issue, really.
This is Don Morton. Let me. I didn't have my fault. I made a mistake at our meeting. The way the bill is, yes, they're going to be housed in the Attorney General's office, but they will still be on campus. And I was under the impression they were all going to be in Bismarck, which I didn't think was very good. I think Grant does make a lot of sense. There is, I've done some checking with some people that I trust. Legislatively, it probably is going to happen, and but there's definitely some amendments that we would like to be a part of the discussion for, and I think we just I think we have an opportunity to do that if as we go down the road, and particularly as the legislative process is a long process, and we still have to go through the Senate, where historically higher ed has done better. So I think we just got to, there is a system and a process that we got to work within and be a part of the dialogue when it comes to amendments for this.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Dr. Jones, so this is Carrie.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a cold and I have a little hard time talking, but I guess, my thought on this is I'm good with what Grant's suggesting, although maybe it seems to me that the concern is we need effective legal assistance and we need effective audit staff or an effective audit function. And I don't really care. There are reasons why you'd want it one place or another. I get that. But the most important thing is that we have it available. And I think the concern is that if, one of these individuals, we can't have turnover in our staff. We need their expertise. And there's this concern also that I think that the pay would be different if they were in the AG's office or reported to the AG. And I think that's another concern because I do think they have specialty expertise. or at least experience, and we don't want to lose that. So my thought is not so much that the board retain authority, and you talked about the audit staff as well. Our outside auditor can't also be performing the internal audit function, right? That's the gist of what I think the state auditor's office told us. And so I think the more important thing is that we have the effective legal counsel and effective audit function. And, wherever we get that, I guess, is less important to me than just having it and keeping it.
Kevin Melker, is there an opportunity at this time to somehow or another spend some time studying both of these issues over the next year, over the next 6 months? I know we're under a time clock with I think they're going back into session on Wednesday, but it would seem to me that there is some merit to keeping both legal and audit systems within our system. One is the audit concerns that we all have read about internal versus external audit, and it seems, and I don't know all of them certainly, I know a couple of the attorneys that are in the system now, and it takes people a while to get them up to speed and to get them current with higher ed issues. And I think it takes a while to also build up the trust level. And I'm not opposed to looking at the issue. I just don't know if we want to look at it by Wednesday or by next week or the week after. And if we would have some time to talk about it at the board level, maybe that's the thing to do. And if they want to rediscuss it during the next session, that's fine, or during interim sessions or things like that. But right now, it would seem to me that from what I'm hearing, there's a strong movement to do this, and we would offer and be able to offer amendments to it, but we have not discussed those as a group. So currently, I would be opposed to letting the process play out without us offering our idea about it.
Mr. President, this is Grant. I have a question for the Chancellor and possibly Murray. It's been too long since I've dealt with the rules of order, so I can't remember how this is accomplished, but is there a way for us to split this question out? So, because I'm sensing that we might have a divided vote on the 4A issue, but I'm concerned that if we come out with a divided vote on the entire position paper, that's really not how we want to represent our view on the totality of this document. Is there a way for us to split this out so that we can have a vote on 4A, but then we can also have a vote on the remaining position?
Or you could offer an amendment.
All right. I just want to make sure we do it correctly.
I think, Grant, you could just offer a friendly amendment to remove that portion from the engrossed position statement, and then we can have that as an additional statement if you would like. I mean, I agree with you. I think sending a perhaps split vote forward doesn't send the message that the other elements in here are absolutely critical. And I would agree. I think Carrie stated it perfectly. I'm not so concerned where the attorneys sit. I'm not so concerned where auditors sit. If we want to have an internal audit element in within the state auditor's office for NDUS, fantastic. And the same thing with regards to the attorneys. My point is retention. I think everybody understands that. Certainly, Gary enunciated that quite well. And so I would suggest that we just pull that out. Now, I can't make the friendly amendment, but certainly Grant or any other member on the board who has the ability official guidance as to what we're thinking. And I don't think we're all that far apart, everybody. I think there's a lot of nuances, but I think those nuances are important to enunciate. So I allow others to comment on that, but that's what I suggest, Grant.
Well, this is Grant, and I'm going to trust Eric because I think he's probably actively sitting in a lot more committees than I do and has probably seen this. So unless there's opposition to this, using this procedure, I would ask for a friendly amendment from the movement and the seconder that we remove item 4A from the position paper, that we then offer the position paper as amended for a vote, and then if anybody cares to bring 4A back for a vote of the board on that specific issue, that we do so at that time.
Okay, what I'm being told here, Mr. Chair, is that Mr. Malacher can amend his motion to do what Mr. Schaaf just said. And then if Dr. Malacher is willing to do that, and then get a second on that, and then we can have a vote on that.
McEwen has to withdraw his second on the motion.
Okay, I'm sorry. Here, go ahead, Cynthia.
This is Cynthia Goulet. As Mr. Malacher is the one who made the motion and Mr. McEwen is the person who seconded it, we need for the motion maker to withdraw, the second to withdraw, and then someone to set up the newly proposed motion, which would be along the lines of the position paper with the 4A removed.
Okay, did everybody get that?
Okay, so
I would like to see the position paper continue as is.
Okay, so that's the motion then.
And who just made that?
Dr. Malacher. His original motion.
He's withdrawing it?
No.
Oh.
he's only beginning the same. So you want to vote on
Dr. said what you have is you have a motion and a second, the position paper as written.
any other questions?
Yeah, this is Chris McEwen. I don't know if we're still, as a board, still on the topic of legal and audit services, but I was requested by the NDSU and UND student delegates to read off their position on the position paper, if that would be entertained.
Yes, they would.
Perfect, thank you. So this came from Aaron Weber, who is a student representative for North Dakota State University Student Government. Even though he wrote it from the NDSU viewpoint, it was concurred by UND's student delegation, and I'll read off it now. NDSU student government feels strongly that student affordability is one of the greatest concerns facing students today. To alleviate this concern, we ask that the State Board of Higher Education include priorities relating to scholarship, grant, and open educational resource funding increases in their legislative priorities. The funding for all three of these initiatives is contained within HB 1003. The funding for scholarships and open educational resources has seen a reduction when compared to Governor Dalrymple's recommendations. NDSU student government fully supports the governor's executive budget recommendations and levels of funding contained in it. We ask that you consider adding legislative priorities relating to those three key initiatives, which again are scholarship, grant, and open educational resource funding. Thank you. And again, this was concurred by UND student delegation.
Any comments?
Janice, if I can make just a quick comment. I feel it's my duty as a representative of staff on these campuses to remind the board that these are our employees and that we have an obligation, I feel, to ensure that they are getting a due process in this and to make sure that our institutions can run properly. You know, there's been some real concerns addressed here, and I would hope that we would not stand in support of this. And as Grant said, we can look into options later, but I think we have an obligation to these employees to stand up for their position, their jobs.
So what are you suggesting, Janice?
I think this motion should pass, and we should not be in favor of removing our attorneys and our auditors from the university system at this time.
Okay.
Mr. President, this is Kathleen Nessett.
Kathleen?
I would like to further discussion just briefly here in that up until the February 26th meeting, which is the continued today, March 3rd meeting, this is the first that the board has dealt with this. We have not fully addressed the issues that are brought up in 4A, and yet we're asked as a board to provide a position to the legislature. I don't feel that we are equipped to do that at this time, and I do think that 4A should not be included in this position paper.
This is Don Morton. I agree with Kathleen on that.
This is
I'll go.
I'm sorry. This is Chris.
For a moment, this is Eric. I'll go back to Grant's point that I think a split vote going forward will send a message that the entire position discussion, the entire position paper was voted on, and there's opposition to numerous parts of it by the board, and I think that sends a wrong message. So I thought that the best position, and I think everybody has excellent points. We haven't studied this, but the reality is, I think we need to have a strong voice going forward. Items 1, 2, and 3 are absolutely essential. The formula, as you recall, is an important issue. Not tinkering with the formula, not removing a few spark plugs, to use the automobile analogy. So I really would suggest, there's no doubt in my mind that we don't send a split element forward, and that's what we're hearing right now. And I think it is best to split out 4A from this process. And I suggest that you all thoughtfully examine that again after the discussion we've just had, and perhaps amend that position. But that is up to the board, but that's my advice to you.
Kevin Melker, I would be interested in looking at 4A if one word would be changed, where it says we must ensure the board retains responsibility. How about if we change the word retain to reviews responsibility for the following? Is that acceptable?
Comment, Grant?
Well, I'm not sure that as far as just a position that we're representing to the legislature, I don't think that makes any difference. I think really the best way to do it, from my view, is if the motion's not amended. Again, from my view, that we go ahead and call the roll. If the motion is defeated, then I would reoffer a new motion for the board to approve the position paper without 4A, and I think that accomplishes what we've been discussing, including what Eric had indicated.
Are you ready to call for the vote?
So, Dr. Dumstead, this is Carrie.
Yeah.
I don't mean to throw a wrench in this because I feel like this discussion's getting a little bit kind of, maybe we're kind of saying the same things over and over, but to Kathleen's point, I really think that what we're trying to do here, my understanding, is to say, okay, look, this bill comes out, and here's, as a board, here's what our position is. Here's what our key. I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with this, or a lot of things we'd change, right, if we could. But what are the really critical things we're looking at? And so, to me, 1, 2, and 3, absolutely, right? Easy. While I'm not saying 4A is not really important, I'm saying, is it, one of the things we want to lump in with what, is absolutely critical to our institutions right now? And again, I'm not saying it's not important. But I also, I appreciate Chris's comment as a student. I mean, we're talking about a strategic plan to bring in, retain our best and brightest and get them through the system and reward them for their hard work and keep them in the state to, be part of our workforce. And scholarships are critical. And so I think that, if we are to sit down and go, okay, what are the key things that we see being cut or that need to be included, I guess I appreciate that, the student feedback on scholarships as well. So, I'm happy to vote for whatever we can all agree on. But just to point that I think what we're trying to do here is say what are our key things, and maybe that makes it okay to leave out 4A or even a couple. There's a couple others in 4. I mean, to me, 4E is pretty important. But do we consider including scholarships?
For the benefit of the board and to have the motion move forward, I would agree to remove 4A.
Okay. Kevin made the motion. You want to remove 4A?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Mr. McEwen gave the second. Would he second that?
Yep, I'll second that change.
So we're voting on the House bill without 4A included. Any questions?
Can Marie talk?
Okay, this is
on the roll.
This is Chris McEwen. Regarding to, and to go off Carrie's comment, also some of the students' comments too, I wanted to hear at least a little bit in terms of what will be the next steps in terms of HB 103 in terms of, what to do with this engrossed paper, because from the student perspective here, really the biggest thing that we really want to see advocated going forward is some of the things mentioned, especially in regards to the tuition funding formula, and it'd be helpful to hear some comments in terms of what will be the next steps, because there is a lot of material here varying a lot of different things, including ones that the legislature seems, at this current juncture, intent on not having being priorities for them.
Grant, and I can offer at least just a strategy viewpoint with the students, which has proved successful in the past. But oftentimes, the face of the university system during the legislative process, simply by necessity, is it's either the system office or board members, and there are some appearances by the student association and some students, but they don't become the face of the system. And in the past, when the students have been well organized and presented themselves before the legislature, they typically will have some success, because the legislature, when they're seeing the students face to face, they look at them obviously a lot differently than they do dealing with the board or the university system. So from a strategic standpoint, moving forward, I think the more vocal the students are and the more present the students are, we have a far greater likelihood of getting 1003 amended on the Senate side, so that it's in good shape coming into the conference committee.
Thank you, Grant. Appreciate that.
I think what this does, it makes it very clear what we spend the next several weeks, next several months talking to our representatives about. But at the same time, I think we continue to have the discussion around 4A. Is it appropriate for us to have a discussion with the Attorney General to see how he plans on approaching this? See what his idea is around compensation, about assignments. Is that appropriate or not? I don't know.
Dr. Jelmstead, Larry here. I think I would ask General Sogsveen to weigh in here. I know he's been downstairs talking to that office, and maybe he can answer Mr. Morton's question.
Larry, are you there?
Murray?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I couldn't find the mute button.
Okay.
Chancellor Scogan and I have a meeting scheduled with the Attorney General tomorrow afternoon to discuss this. If you are going to remove item 4A from the other document, it's my suggestion that perhaps you table 4A until the March board meeting and invite Attorney General to attend the March board meeting, and that would allow Chancellor Scogan and I to meet with the Attorney General and perhaps talk through some of these issues, possibly including the legislators, and we might have some potential solutions by March.
Okay.
That sounds very reasonable.
Okay, so the suggestion is we table 4A until our March 26th meeting, and we vote on the rest of the House bill right now.
And invite Attorney General Stenjum to the March meeting.
And I might suggest that State Auditor Robert Peterson ought to be part of that conversation too.
Okay, so that part will be tabled until March 26th, if that's agreeable.
I don't know if you need an approval or not, but I agree with that.
Well, okay, that would be Dr. Maliker's motion then.
Okay, so you want to finish the motion, Kevin?
I'm sorry, Terry.
The motion is do you want to make a motion to table 4A until March 26th?
Yeah, the motion would be to approve the position and to put 4A on the table until our March board meeting for further discussion.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Yes.
That's Mr. McEwen?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, Christie, call the roll.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Ms. Reichert? Yes. Ms. Nessett?
Yes.
Dr. Meliker?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. Shaft?
Shaft votes yes.
Board Chair Jelmstead?
Yes. Okay, let's move on.
Okay,
the UND. Yes.
I'm sorry, I was going to say on number 11, if Laura could explain what the situation is. She's been meeting with the administrative affairs folks about the tuition model that you approved, and as you know, there's been some conversation in the legislature as well relative to setting tuitions. And so, Laura, if you would go ahead and explain that one, please.
Thank you, Chancellor. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm on page 14 of your PDF board agenda file. There's a summary document. The action today is to ask you to extend the final implementation deadline date for the new tuition model from fall of 2017 to fall of 2018. It had been our intention to bring to you in March proposed tuition model rates under the new plan. as the Chancellor mentioned, given there is legislation pending right now that could take tuition setting away from the board, it would be a bit premature to bring any tuition model changes or rate changes to you before the conclusion of the session. That means then that waiting till the end of the session, that we would not be able to bring forward proposed tuition model changes in the rates until May or June. Quite honestly, that is getting far too close to the start of the fall semester because the original plan called for initial implementation at some campuses to start in the fall of 2015, but all campuses to be fully implemented by fall of 17. So that essentially would give campuses 3 years, fall of 15, fall of 16, and fall of 17, to phase in the new model to limit the impact to students in any given year. Given the delay potentially caused by the legislation now, we believe it's just too narrow of a window to get things functional at some campuses starting this fall. We still believe, though, that a 3-year implementation window is important because for some student groups, the new model may have a fairly material price impact. And so we want to be able to phase those adjustments in over a period of time so that we can soften that to students in any 1 year. And so again, this would move us from fall of 17 to fall of 18 and just buy additional time to make a smooth and orderly transition, both with regards to student impact, but also being able to ready our administrative systems and make other process changes, and also then giving parents and students timely notification of a rather significant change in the tuition structure.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
And there is a motion on page 14 in item 2 in the summary document.
Mr. President, this is Grant.
Okay.
I just have a quick question for Laura. Laura, is it your view that we would still need to delay the deadline even if the current legislation fails?
Yes, only because we believe that will be likely one of the final pieces of legislation acted on during the session. Typically, the higher ed bills are some of the very last. So we're anticipating action, close to April 29th, which means then that we would not be able to have a discussion, a first discussion about those tuition models and rates until sometime in May at the very earliest. And then presuming the board doesn't want to take action on first reading or the first time you see it, we could be possibly pushed into late May or June. By that time, we need to already be gearing up for the fall term. And so it really delays most campuses' ability to start anything this fall.
Right.
But we really do strongly believe in having a 3-year transition period. So if we lose this fall, the first transition period then by default becomes fall of 16, and then fall 17 and fall 18 would be the 3-year window.
Very good. Thank you.
This is Chris McEwen. I will make the proposed motion to approve deadline date for final implementation of new tuition model from fall 2007 to fall 2008. Further, campuses retain authority to begin implementation in fall 2015 as desired, following approval by the State Board of Higher Education of new tuition rates.
This is Don Morton. I will second that motion with the caveat that we just, I think Laura raised a good point. We do need time to get all the different constituencies, make sure everybody has their input. That's just the way it works, and that's what we have to work within.
And I'll note that for anybody that didn't understand what I said, I did read proposed motion verbatim on the position paper.
So those people that can read know exactly what he just said.
Any more questions on the motion or the second? Okay, Christy, call the roll.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Mr. Shaft?
Shaft votes yes.
Dr. Melliker?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Board Chair Jolmstead?
Yes. Okay, let's move on to the next board business dealing with UND's police department.
Dr. Jolmstead, number 12 and number 13 are the
dealing with
the state presidential search.
Okay.
Where did he get that?
Larry, do you want to?
Looking at an old agenda.
Want to make a motion? Do we want to authorize Larry to hire a consultant? Is there a motion to authorize Larry to hire a consultant?
Kevin Melliker, so moved.
Okay, motion by Kevin.
Dr. Melliker.
Melliker moved. Who second?
Sure. Chris, you all second.
Okay. Second by Chris. So we have a motion and a second to authorize Chancellor Scogan to hire a consultant for the Dickinson State presidential search. Christy, call the roll.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Dr. Melliker?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. Shaft?
Shaft votes yes.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Board Chair Jolmstead?
Yes. And then our next action is to appoint a board member to chair the Dickinson State Presidential Search Committee. If I have that authority, I'd like to appoint Terry Reichert to be the chair of that committee. Anybody want to make a motion, or do we need a motion?
You would need a motion.
I'll make the motion on an excellent recommendation.
And I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Dr. Melliker, were you the second on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Melliker?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Mr. Shaft?
Shaft votes yes.
Board Chair Jolmstead?
Yes. Congratulations, Carrie. You're the new board chair of the Dickinson Presidential Search Committee. Okay, moving on.
Before we move on, I do have a question about our action on 1003. Did we ever take a final vote on Kevin's revised motion?
We did. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
We just tabled 4A.
Okay, got you. Okay, perfect. Just making sure for clarification. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, the last one is the UND name change from Wilkerson Hall to Wilkerson Commons. Is there a motion for that name change?
Dr. Jolmstead, the information on that is on page 16 on your PDF, and I don't know if anybody has any questions. I know President Kelly is on the line.
The background information is right there.
This is Don Moore, and I'll make the motion that we move ahead with this.
Okay, motion by Don. Is there a second?
Second, this is Chris.
Chris, second. Is there any other discussion?
Does President Kelly have some insights for us?
I'd be certainly happy to answer any questions. This is a name change that associates with the expansion and the renovation of the old Wilkerson complex. It's one of the main dining commons on campus. It's a gathering place, a place for collaboration of students. And considering trends in naming facilities on campuses these days, the use of commons is not only trending, but it's very well established. So we're just requesting a permission to change the name of a building on campus as it gets renovated and expanded. Wilkerson Commons.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Any other comments? Okay, Christy, call the roll.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf?
Schaaf votes yes.
Dr. Melliker?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Board Chair Jumstead?
Yes. Okay, the next item deals with the, I believe this is the authorized DSU to issue revenue bonds. Is that correct, Larry?
That is correct, sir. And on page 17 of your PDF has the background information to this, and this is part of the receivership that's going on out at the foundation, as you are all very well aware of. I'd like to turn it over to General Sogsveen if he wants to, if he would please cover sort of the background to this and what's happened to this point. And then we can, and I know DSU is on the line as well, and we can respond to any questions any of the board members may have. So, General Sogsveen, would you lay out the background to this, please?
Yes, as a part of the receivership issue, we've had a substantial number of discussions involving the receivers, Dickinson State University, Dickinson State University Foundation, and the cash flow issue. And during those discussions, we developed what could be a win-win situation for both DSU and the foundation. DSU has a cash flow challenge, and the foundation has a cash flow challenge, and one of the solutions to that is to start selling off the properties that it has been developing, including student housing properties. DSU, at the same time, is interested in acquiring those properties. So the win-win situation could be that if DSU Foundation disposes of certain student housing properties and DSU purchases those properties, DSU would end up with properties that it would enhance the campus, and the foundation would end up with cash that it could use to resolve some of its cash flow issues. This is not a situation where the DSU would be bailing out the foundation. This would be a situation where they have mutually, they have issues that the purchase of this property would help both DSU and the foundation. So based on those discussions, I drafted the motion that would authorize us to seek legislation, the requested legislation, and would authorize DSU to issue revenue bonds subject to legislative approval. And so it's a step-by-step process. And DSU President Mark Lowe is also there, and D.C. Costin is also there to explain this, if further explanation is needed.
Dr. Costin? which one of those, Woods Hall property is not on the campus, is that right?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is not talking about Woods Hall. This is talking about 3 other properties. 2 of the issues that certainly during my time at Dickinson State have been major challenges are providing contemporary housing, the type of housing that students across the nation expect, and being able to attract students. We have actually had a number of students who were initially coming to Dickinson State and declined to come because the only student housing we really had to offer them was traditional dormitory type. So that has been a significant challenge. And then, as all of you I think are aware, and those of you who were here in April of 2014 with the board that we toured the community, understand the housing challenge we have had for faculty and staff, particularly being able to have affordable housing to attract faculty and staff. What is before you today allows Dickinson State University to address these 2 issues. 2 of the buildings, the one known as Altringer and Miller, are immediately adjacent to campus. They have housed Dickinson State students for more than 15 years, and this would allow the university to have full control over those and have our housing guidelines, our housing rules related to students for managing those. The other one is spelled B-O-S-C-H, but in Dickinson that's pronounced Bush. The Bush Apartments is a complex where there are several of our faculty and staff currently living there, and over time, as people departed that would give us an opportunity to provide some of that housing. We would have, Dickinson State would have a clear interest in coming before you regardless of who owned these buildings and the circumstances they were in, provided that the economics and finances of a deal worked. It just so happens, as General Sogsveen and the Chancellor mentioned, that those buildings are currently owned by the Foundation. So the ability to help the Foundation with some of its issues is a side benefit to something that is clearly an important part of the future of this institution. Mark Lowe, our Vice President for Finance and Administration, has gotten the books from the Dickinson State University Foundation, has been through them. The request that was before you would include that the properties would be bought at an appraised value that would come as a part of that bonding process, and it also would that the agreement with the Foundation would be that any or all of the properties could be bought, and either party could withdraw from that up until the point of closing on the properties. But our desire would this would definitely help make Dickinson State more attractive to some students. It would allow us to do some programming, particularly some of the living learning type programming that is popular at several of the other institutions in the system as well as across the nation, and also allow us to be able to provide reasonably priced housing for some faculty and staff that we can attract. So that is our request, and the request lying before you is to authorize the Chancellor to work with the bills to include potential bond funding to assist in this project.
Dr. Costin, Kevin Melliker, as I was looking through this information, there were some changes in Dickinson State University in the past few years to trim the costs, and one of them was to vacate the residence hall. How does that fit into this whole concept, and what is happening to that residence hall?
That residence hall is the Woods Hall. That is physically located on the campus. We had moved forward with board approval about a year ago to
to seek to renovate that facility. The reason it is vacant is that we had planned for renovations to be occurring now. The board had given us authority to move on to the next step, and as we did the final due diligence, we found that the legislative process, at least to us, we assumed that budget section could give that authorization on behalf of the Legislative Assembly. We found that that is one of the processes that the Legislative Assembly retains only to itself in full session. So because of legislative rules, we got delayed at least a year in doing the Woods Hall renovation. Depending on what happens here, depending on where we look, we would make the final decision as to whether or not to move forward with the Woods Hall project, assuming the Legislative Assembly gave us the approval for that as well.
And you're not anticipating any issues with filling up the facilities, these new facilities that will be purchased by the university, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Oh, as far as your the use of the facilities right now, are they full currently?
The two facilities that house students currently, Altringer and Miller, are essentially full, and the Bush Apartments, as far as I know, all 16 of those units are leased and rented out, and we would anticipate that all three of those properties would continue to be essentially full.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions for Dr. Costin?
Mr. Chairman, this is Kathleen Ness, but I do have one more question, just for clarity.
Okay.
I fully agree that the receiver working on behalf of the foundation and doing this work, is the expert, and the recommendation for the purchase by DSU for these 3 apartment buildings is their recommendation. I agree with it. I'm going to ask if Dr. Costin could revisit the discussion on the renovations to Woods Hall, though. What is the impact of that, and what's the tie-in if this proposed motion were to move forward with the Woods Hall? What is that impact?
Let me ask Vice President for Finance and Administration Mark Lowe to talk about that.
Mr. Chairman, the Woods Hall is a traditional dormitory, and the idea was to renovate that facility and turn that into more contemporary housing, being more, I'll call akin to apartment living, that each unit would have its own bathroom, etc. If we're to acquire the 3 properties that are before you today, we will reevaluate Woods Hall in terms of if we still want to continue to move forward and turn that into a non-traditional housing, or if we simply update its current status and leave it in a similar format that it currently is. So without these properties, certainly we would want to alter Woods Hall into the apartment-style living. With the acquisition of these 3, we will have to rethink that. We want the authority to go ahead and do that with the $7.5 million, but certainly we wouldn't pull the trigger on that until we do some further analysis on that.
Well, thank you. Let me just look at the bullet point. Yeah, the bullet point says, Chancellor proposed an amendment to House Bill 1139 or House Bill 1003 to authorize revenue bonds for renovation. So how is that tied to the authorization for the purchase of the 3 structures? And once again, I'm going to restate that I am in agreement in purchasing these structures because it is at the recommendation of the receiver. But how does this amendment impact the Chancellor's proposed amendment to these House bills?
Murray, it may be best for you to address that one.
This is Murray. I will address that. There were several months ago, we decided to introduce a separate bill, House Bill 1139, to authorize the issuance of revenue bonds for the Woods Hall project. And the reason that we decided that separate from the appropriation bill is that we were hoping to, with the emergency clause on House Bill 1139, if it passed with the emergency clause, DSU could start the renovating of Woods Hall earlier than August 1st, when normal bills go in, or July 1st when appropriations bills become effective. During the process, or during the recent weeks, when the issue came up about the 3 apartment buildings, we were proposing to amend House Bill 1139 with the emergency clause to allow the issuance of revenue bonds to also include the purchasing or the revenue bonds for the 3 student properties. The House Bill 1139 has now been amended, and it's over to the Senate, and we need to re-amend House Bill 1139 to provide authorization for Woods Hall and the acquisition of the 3 student properties. And so everything is in, House Bill 1139 and House Bill 1003 are both in the Senate. And if we can amend 1139 with an emergency clause, DSU could start this process much earlier. It's a little bit confusing. I hope I haven't confused you more.
No, I think I'm following you, but so what if I do just follow up on that, Murray? What you're saying is that the amendment would be to House Bill 1139, which would allow for renovations to Woods Hall and the acquisition of 3 apartment housing units, or 3 student housing units.
Yes, and if House Bill 1139 is defeated, then everything would have to go into 1003, which would delay things significantly.
Okay, I understand that. The need for housing on DSU grounds. I once again will defer to the receiver that these housing units should be accepted, but did I hear from Dr. Costin that this may change the intent of renovations to Woods Hall, and if so, who oversees that?
This is D.C. Costin. You heard Vice President Lowe address that. The last thing we're going to do is put Dickinson State University in financial jeopardy. I'll remind the board that at this point, Dickinson State University has no long-term debt. We do need to have this institution positioned to be attractive to students. And as Mr. Lowe said, what you would be giving us is the ability to make management decisions in the best interest of the institution as we're looking at enrollment growth and student housing. And as Mark indicated, if the purchase of these 3, particularly the 2 that address student housing that are part of that, it could cause the Woods Hall project to be undertaken a bit later. My judgment from having been here is that at some point Woods Hall will be renovated, because I think the institution will grow and that type of housing is what's attractive. But having worked at this institution with the folks that provide the leadership here, it is not done in that leadership and management is done in a way that is highly responsible. And I think if you've looked at financial audits of the institution, you see that we take very seriously how we go about those.
Thank you, Dr. Costin.
I do think, and if I might add just a touch to what Murray said, just for perhaps for final clarification, perhaps for some of you as you consider this. The 1139 does have the emergency clause, which means that the legislature, both chambers, pass it, and it gets to the governor, you can begin to move forward right then. The being able to move forward with this, assuming the assuming the appraisals make it work and all those caveats that are on it, we will need to begin to make commitments to students for their housing for next fall. That's typically done late March to mid-April on most campuses. So there is a bit of urgency, at least giving us the authority to take the next steps to continue down the path of looking at this. And 1139 is the vehicle that makes that at least potentially possible.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Costin and Mark, for your work with all of this housing development. Any other questions, comments? Do we need a motion?
This is Chris McEwen. I move to authorize Chancellor Scogan to seek an amendment to House Bill 1139 or House Bill 1003 to authorize Dixon State University to issue bonds to acquire the 3 properties for student housing.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Kevin Miller, second.
You got a couple of seconds in the background. Who are they, please?
To do all of those, all 3 of them?
I'll make a friendly amendment to my motion to also include the other, to include B and C of House Bill 1139 and House Bill 1003 are as appropriately amended and enacted. Motion authorizes DSU to acquire the 3 properties for student housing and authorize the Chancellor to take appropriate action to facilitate acquisition of the 3 properties of DSU. So all 3, A, B, and C.
Okay, and Dr. Milliker was the second?
That's fine. I agree.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the 3 properties at Dickinson State. Is there a... Christy, take the roll.
Ms. Nessett?
Yes.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Mr. Shaft?
Shaft votes yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Dr. Milliker?
Yep.
Board Chair Olmsted?
Yes. Okay, moving on. The academic and student affairs committee recommendations from Chair Reichert. Would you like to go through those?
Yeah, so our committee met a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to remember the exact date. I apologize. And discussed these 4 items for action for the board. We approved all 4. You can see the certificate analysis technician. That's primarily to it appears to be serve the Fargo market as much as the Wahpeton student base there, and it looks like a good program. The Valley City BS and BA in environmental science. There's growing demand for that, and much of the educational resource for that program already exists there at Valley City. Changing the title of the organization of the Department of Geography to Geography and Geographic Information Science. I think GIS is becoming kind of a term that many people are familiar with. So just an update as much as anything there. And then the Valley City State's Career and Tech Educational Leadership Center, and we had some discussion about that. It sounds like a great thing to provide education to our career and tech educators in the state. So I would recommend that the board adopt those 4 items or approve those 4 items.
Okay, we have a recommendation to approve the 4 new programs and so on under Article 17. Any questions at all?
Mr. Chair, this is Nessett. I have a question, Carrie.
Yes.
On that 4th one, the Valley City State University's request to establish a new center. What type of center, and is there a cost associated?
Yeah, so my understanding, and Dr. Scogan jump in, I should have refreshed my recollection a bit more before the meeting, and I apologize, but creating it's a Career and Tech Ed Leadership Center, which is designed to help train our career and tech ed educators. Is that was my understanding. And yes, there is a cost. The State Department of there's some state funds available, some grant money available for it, and so I don't believe there's an additional cost to the university. And I apologize, Dr. Skogman, would you help me out a little bit?
Actually, I'll ask Dr. Mason to jump in on this one. And before I turn it over to Tisa, though, I want to be very clear. We had quite a lot of discussion on this, you'll remember, Ms. Reichert, because the folks thought that Valley City was setting up a technical training area, and what it really is it's educating the technical educators, and which Valley City has done for a long time, and in fact they have a master's degree in that as well. So, but Dr. Mason, do you have some information to add to this, please?
Yes, and I think the most important thing is that the center already existed. It's simply a name change. Don Mugen was very pivotal and essential in this leadership center, and we've talked to the family about adopting his name for the center. And again, the center really focuses on teacher ed training, not on the student.
Thank you, Dr. Mason. So what you were saying that this, I mean, when I read this, it says establish a new center. So we're not really establishing a new center. We are renaming an existing center?
Yes.
Thank you.
I apologize. Go ahead.
This is Richard Rothus. I just wanted to mention that after the committee met, we did ask Valley City for additional financial information on the center, and that's being reviewed by Vice Chancellor Glott. So we are looking at that also.
And I apologize, Ms. Vincent. My understanding was that this was many of the resources existed already, but I understood this to be new as well. So this is good to know. And I actually, during that discussion, I had confused it with the Great Plains STEM Education Center, which we talked about at a meeting a few months back, and realizing this is the career and tech ed versus the STEM educators.
Yep. This is Chris McHugh, and I also sit on the committee with Carrie, and that was my understanding as well, that this was merely just an organizational realignment within VCSU that wouldn't dedicate extra resources they aren't already dedicating.
Okay, anything else here?
I concur with that point. I also sit on the committee. So.
Okay, well, this is Nesset. I've heard that there are funds involved, but if my understanding from discussion is that they've already been allotted, so to speak. Is that a fair way to characterize this?
That is true, that there's no new state appropriated dollars being requested, and the center will be self-supporting. And maybe a little confusion with my newness is it may be that the activities are existing and it's just coming under the name change with the center name, if that makes sense. But all of these activities have been happening.
Alrighty, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mason. Any other comments, Gary? Anything else on your committee?
No, just to clarify, I do believe that there are career tech ed funds that are available. There are grant funds from the state that are going towards this, but they're not institution funds. And so, I'm not sure if you have the notes on that, but we can certainly forward those on. But I appreciate that question.
Okay, if that's all of that committee, let's move on. Budget and Finance Committee recommendations from Karen Moore.
Excuse me, Dr. Johnson. We need to vote on that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We need a motion, a second, and a vote on item 16.
Okay, let's take a motion to the effect of the Stage 2 programs, all four of them.
This is Chris McEwen. This is Chris McEwen. I move to adopt recommendations of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee.
Okay. Is there a second?
This is Nesset. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, Christy, call the roll.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Mr. Shaft?
Shaft votes yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Dr. Melliker,
Yes.
Board Chair Jomstead.
Yes. Okay, now, Don, we'll look at the Budget and Finance Committee recommendations.
Okay, we've already passed approval for the sale of the 240 acres for the Dixon Research Center, and what we're asking now is the specific 30 acres that's going to be sold initially. It's been looked at by legal, and it's been looked at by Mr. Tonder and Laura Glatt, and it's got the Chancellor's recommendation to approve.
Any questions? Okay, we could have a motion to approve the sale of the 30 acres.
Melliker, so moved.
Motion by Melliker, is there a second?
Second, this is Carrie.
Second for Gary. Any discussion? Hey, Christie, call the roll.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Dr. Melliker?
Yes.
Mr. Schaft?
Schaft votes yes.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Board Chair Jomstead?
Yes. Okay, other consent items, Don?
The next item has to do with the continued with the resident hall bathroom renovations at NDSU. It's a low-rise laboratories renovation project, and it's gone through all the proper review by Mr. Tonder and Laura Glatt, and it's being paid for out of auxiliary services. It won't be any state appropriation.
Any questions on that?
Dr. Jomstead, Larry here. Do we want to do all of 18 together? So maybe, I don't know if Bruce Mollinger's on or if Laura wants to add on the other two items so we can cover all three at the same time.
Yeah, let's just cover all three. Okay.
The next item is to demolish, is to authorize the demolition of Thorolson Hall.
Yeah.
So I have, this is Eric, I have a question here. I take it the state appropriated funds are for the demolition portion of this?
From appropriate funds, yes. And from parking funds. Bruce, are you on the line?
Laura's on the line. Laura?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's correct.
Okay, because I was under the impression that appropriated funds couldn't be used to build a parking lot on a campus, and the separation of those funds into those two allocations, I thought, indicated that the demolition was funded as confirmed by Laura for the demolition part is the appropriated funds. Thank you.
Okay, if we could look at all three items, is there a motion to approve?
This is Chris McEwen. I will so move to approve.
Second. By Chris. And we have a second. Any other discussion? Okay, Christie, call the roll.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. McEwen?
I hope so.
Yes.
Mr. Schaft?
Schaft votes yes.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Dr. Melliker?
Yes.
Board Chair Jomstead?
Yes. Okay, moving on to board policy. We have no first reading. Who wants to take care of the second reading?
General Sogsveen will take care of that one, sir.
Okay.
This is where this policy amendment was proposed by Board Member Grant Shaft, and for the first reading, after the first reading, it was circulated for additional comments, and Rick Tonder had suggested an amendment to it that would primarily address the alteration of buildings, but the key provision of the policy amendment as first introduced with the first reading remains unchanged, and that's that the Chancellor shall forward plans to the Board with the Chancellor's recommendation unless the Board acts on a plan within 60 days after the Chancellor is informed of the plan. The institution may implement the plan. So what this does is that if a building older than 50 years of age is planned for demolition, that the Board would be informed of it, and the Board would have an opportunity to take action. If the Board does not take any action, then the institution can do whatever it wants to with that building.
Any comment?
So the motion is to approve the amendment to policy 903.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion to that policy 903?
This is Grant. I move approval.
This is Dunbar, second. Okay. There's a motion and a second to approve the amendment and the policy 903. Christie, call the roll.
Mr. Shaft?
Shaft votes yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. McEwen?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Reichert?
Yes.
Dr. Melliker?
Yes.
Board Chair Jones-Stead?
Yes. Okay, lastly, let's look at the policies under review. Murray, are you going to look at that too?
I will. Those are just the policies that are under review, and some of them I believe will be ready for first reading at the March board meeting.
You want to go through each one of those individually?
I will. Policy 340.2 has to do with foundations. We're looking at that policy particularly in light of the experience that we had with the Dickinson State University Foundation, and also as a result of Attorney General opinions on open records and open meetings concerning foundations, and hope to have that for first reading in March. The second one has to do with alcoholic beverages on campuses, 918. And currently the Board of Higher Education is reviewing exceptions to the policy on a case-by-case basis. And what we're considering is simplifying that policy a little bit and delegating more authority to the presidents in the proposed draft. Policy 611.10 has to do with theft, fraud, abuse, and waste, and I would like to simplify that concerning our fraud hotline to make it more user-friendly. And policy 840 has to do with contract review. And one of the issues that we're particularly concerned about is what we call the click-through agreements. And every time people update their software, they're asked to review a 25-page agreement and click through And what many people do is click through without reviewing the agreements, and we're trying to address particularly that issue. Also in the contract review, all contracts are now subject to review, and we're looking at whether some contracts, smaller contracts, do not need a contract review. And so we're hoping that all four, maybe 3 out of the 4, would be available next month, or at the end of this month.
Okay, thank you, Murray. Any questions of Murray? Well, that kind of takes us through our policies, and it takes us through the end of the meeting. Any other comments or questions? Well, if I could at this time, I'd like the motion to adjourn. Our next meeting is March 26th in Bismarck.
Did someone motion to adjourn?
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, thank you.
I knew Don would. Motion by Don, any second?
Second by Nessa, and Terry, we're all glad to hear that you're, and Sal, that you are feeling better. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy, for taking the first half of the meeting, or first 6/3 of it, or whatever we call it. So thank you.
Teamwork, Terry. Teamwork.
Yeah, everybody have a wonderful day.
Glad to have you back.
Yep. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.